Hey everybody, welcome back to another Kitecast episode. I'm here with my partner in crime, Tim Freestone. Tim, how are you doing today?
Good. How you doing, Patrick?
I am doing fine as well. We're in for a real treat. Michael Redman, who currently is the Knowledge and Learning Management Lead over at Schellman, a CMMC provisional instructor, assessor, you name it. He has like 20 different certifications and classifications that he can put after his name, more than I can ever imagine. We're going to talk about that with him, among many other things. So, Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's start with, you've been in this role, I think, for like 15 plus years. Talk a bit about what you do and what you like about it. And I'm sure it's evolved over the years.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a role, I've grown to love, and it happened quite honestly by accident, right? Born in Columbus, Ohio, born and bred, Ohio State Buckeye, and, did what any good Ohio son will do. And went to Ohio State University and, got, what I call the degree my mom paid for, right? Got a degree in psychology, and, no one bothered to tell me, right, or warn me. There's absolutely nothing you're going to do with a bachelor's degree in psychology, right? So at the time, I think I could have become like a social worker, but I still would have had to go, I think, through like 6 more weeks of licensure and what have you. And I was definitely on the 7-year plan in college, so more schooling was not in the cards for me. I really don't care enough about other people's problems to listen to them all day. So that just wasn't going to work. So I ended up joining the Marine Corps, and, my dad was 26 years in the Navy. So I figured, how could I go wrong there? And had a great time. Unfortunately, as the winds of change will have it, ended up hurting myself and had to get out. And now I'm right back to square zero, right? Got shipped out, back to Ohio, realized why I left Ohio in the first place, because it's very cold. And so drove south, right? Till I hit water in my little 89 Ford Probe and all that it would carry. And just bounced around for about 4 or 5 years, everything from, selling cars to, I was a radio DJ for most of that time. Which I was also a nightclub DJ for, part of that time. What's that?
You got the voice for the DJ work.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I absolutely have the face for radio. That's and unfortunately, people think, right, that radio DJs get paid, a fair amount of money, but we really don't, right? We do it for the sheer narcissism of it. So, I met a young lady that, I was convinced I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and the life of a radio DJ is not conducive to a happy home life. So, I left radio and ended up at Singular Wireless, right? A Singular Wireless call center down in Ocean Springs, Mississippi, making $9.15 an hour fixing cell phones, right? And within 2 months, they had taken me off the floor and I became a trainer, right? Because it was just intuitive to me to fix, how to fix cell phones. Because my mother, right, she was a middle school teacher for a decade and then decided that she hated the kids and, more, I think if she were to tell you the truth, she hated the parents. And ended up going back to school and getting a degree in computer programming. And, I can remember almost to the day what the room smelled like, right? When she, finished her schooling and sat me down in the kitchen and said, no matter what you do in life, you are going to learn computers. She didn't care if I was a teacher or a trash man or anything else, right? But I had to learn a computer. So I was one of those kids that got computers every year for Christmases and birthdays and Easter and what have you. So, 1 week we had a career fair at Singular Wireless, and the local community college came and set up stuff. And I was looking through the different offerings, and I stopped to talk to the counselor for computer networking. And I said, well, what's this all about? And, she kind of explained to me. It sounded great, right? Travel the country as a CCNA, designing, setting up, and troubleshooting networks for banks and schools and, what have you. I said, well, that's great, but they're seeing, I don't know that I'm cut out for it. She said, can you count to 255? I said, yes, I can. She said, that's all you need to be able to do. And I said, I can do that. So yeah, the next week I enrolled in school, and kind of just the rest, as they say, is history, right? Now here, almost 20 years later, when I finished school, finished, a couple associates and bachelors, ended up working for the DoD Red Teams, because as it turned out, I was pretty good in getting into things that I wasn't supposed to be at. And I figured, hey, if they're going to pay me for it, then all the better. And over the years, just kept getting promoted farther and farther away from the keyboard, where I began managing teams of red teams, and then eventually becoming a government civilian myself, managing all the contracts for the teams of red teams, and so working all of those different roles and absorbing, right, how every side of the fence is a little bit different on how they approach cybersecurity and network security and just security as a whole. I've kind of put together in a neat little ball that now I carry around in my back pocket, and people seem to gravitate to it. So I guess it's not a bad thing. And if I can, help one or two organizations along the way, well, I've done my job, I guess.
And for someone who was not inclined to want to continue a long trek in education, your background seems very strange, or
Yes.
antithetical to what that original position was. You're now doing a JD, from what I understand, in cybersecurity at
Correct.
Purdue University. And then
Correct.
you referenced all the long list of certifications you have. Many of those, it's not easy to get. So what happened? Was it the Marine Corps?
A lot of it, honestly, I will say a lot of it was, right. It's one of those, the Marine Corps, it teaches you, first of all, if you have a fear, you face it, which is how I got hurt. Right. I used to be deathly afraid of heights. So, hey, why not go jump out of helicopters? And, it also instills in you a very strong work ethic, right? And sense of accomplishment, and, team building, and understanding that just because it looks difficult is not enough an excuse to not do it. So, the path I laid out, right, it was not going to be an easy path. That's for sure. I did a double major at the junior college level, finished my bachelor's, and then, spent, some time kind of, just doing the work. Then a master's in cybersecurity, and yeah, now I'm in my second year of law school. So, and taking an emphasis in cybersecurity and privacy, right, in law school. So it's been a labor of love. And yeah, no matter how much I didn't want to teach, everywhere I go, I end up teaching again. Consulting is just teaching by a different name, right? And now, right, now working for Schellman, they actually created an entire learning and knowledge development organization just so I can teach. Right. So, they put my emphasis currently, right, on, kind of the big marquee ones. Right. So, obviously I do a lot of CMMC training. I do a lot of CISSP training, CISA, CISM, Security Plus. As you mentioned, I have quite a catalog of certifications that I'm authorized, right, or can teach. So, but I figure I think I only list like 4 or 5 on my email signature. You'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. So I kind of figure once you hit the text wrap, then it just becomes pretentious, and that's just that's just me.
You have a long litany, sir, for sure. We
I
want to talk about CMMC. Go ahead, Tim.
No, that's what I was just going to say. Well, one of those acronyms I'm particularly interested in is CMMC. Someone from our organization took one of your courses, and I said, I have a lot of questions. Can we talk to him on a podcast? And one of the things I think most who will listen to this podcast will know what it is, so we can skip, that part of it. But I'm curious, from your perspective, how seriously is the market the defense industrial base taking this regulation as a whole. Do you have a sense of that? Because I talked to, like 2 weeks ago, I was at a CISO event and talked to two CISOs at the head of large manufacturing organizations who do business either with contractors or subcontractors with the Department of Defense. And they were like deer in headlights. They just didn't even have sort of a starting point, right? So did I get unlucky twice, or is it, that the run?
No, so yeah, that really is kind of a loaded question, right? Because I can't make a statement for the entire DIB. However, I can put them in categories. I can put them in groups, right? There are large, medium, and small DIB participants that are taking CMMC very, very seriously, right? That even though it hasn't been codified into law yet, they are just moving out, getting it done, volunteering for the volunteer program because they see the writing on the wall and they know it's coming, right? It's not going to go away. Then there's like this middle group that they sway with the wind, right? They're kind of the LinkedIn junkies that, depending on who posts what on what day, will sway them into one direction or another. And the fortunate part is now that the DoD CIO's office and the Justice Department are actually posting about CMMC, not just on LinkedIn, but a lot of forums, more at a more rapid pace. So there, when the DoD CIO's office speaks, especially when the Justice Department speaks, right, that will outweigh anything that Joe Idiot will say about what he heard at the coffee shop about CMMC. And then, unfortunately, I would say probably a good half of the nearly 350,000 DIB participants are exactly what you described. They don't know, right? They don't know. They've been told so many different things that it's all become goo, in their head. I think a year and a half ago, they were there, they were fired up, they were ready, and then we had our little false start, and it put all of those people kind of in a real bad place because they already invested right into CMMC, either with hiring consultants or actually going ahead and trying to build out infrastructure and work through the certification process as it was understood at that time. It's just to be told, okay, you've done a great job. We'll see you at some point in the near future when we figure out the rest of this. And it just gave them a bad feeling. It became like any other DoD certification process that we've heard about over the years that never actually really happened, right? But the one thing that I try to, as many people as I can talk to, try to, impress upon them is all the other DoD certification processes and all of the executive branch certification processes. CMMC has one characteristic that's different from the rest of them. This one, CMMC, is being codified into law. As soon as that interim rule is entered, right, and you're done, right, it has now become the law of the land. Unlike these other programs that have gone by the wayside, they were just some office managing a certification activity for the organization. So and so I try to get people to think about it. Just think about it that way. As hard as it is to get two sides these days to agree on anything, they have agreed on CMMC. That should let you know it is not going anywhere. So you might as well just kind of learn all you can now, right? Find the right people to learn from now, and look at it as a small blessing, right? That we're having a ramp up start versus a bang go start like we were getting ready to do about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So two-part follow-up then to that. One is what's the latest timeline for the codification of the law? And then the second part is there's two kinds of laws: the laws you follow and the laws you don't. I lived in New York City for 15 years. Jaywalking is illegal.
But
Everybody jaywalks because nobody, and the reason is nobody gets in trouble. So it's like,
that's right.
what's the I don't want to say punishment, but the what am I looking for? What's the word I'm looking for?
So the big stick, right,
The big
is
stick. Thank you. Yeah.
the Justice Department has dusted off a 125-year-old law called False Claims Act. And over the last year, I mean, if you just, like, for instance, set yourself up a Google alert for every time there's an article posted about False Claims Act, every day you are going to get a new article. The Justice Department has ramped up their use of that act, right? And simply all the False Claims Act is what it does is it allows the federal government to come back to the contractor for monies or services that the contractor overbilled the government for. And it has very stiff fines and penalties that go along with it, right? Up to $10,000 per instance. So if you just look, for instance, at CMMC, like level 2, right, and 110 controls, if you were less than forthright, let's just say on 20 of those controls, well, that's 20 controls times 10,000 plus 1.5% of the contract that you bid. Even if you didn't win the contract, even if you were not awarded the contract, part of the consideration that of why you were even in contention was because of your false claims. So if I'm bidding $1 million contract, even though I might not have won it, and they find out that I was doing it under false pretenses, they can attach 1.5 of that $1 million against my organization for making those claims. So that's the big stick that they're swinging around, and it's working pretty well in a lot of instances because, and rightfully so, I think they started with some pretty big names, right? Like Aerodyne and Boeing, and now I think I get probably 3 a day from a medical ring that they have beat up on, got $32 million out of. And so because the big names are being kind of hit, it makes all of us down here in minutia land, it's like, well, if they're going to go after Boeing and Aerodyne and SAIC, why would they not come after me? Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing to kind of put into your head is yes, they are actually coming after organizations, for lack of a better term, for lying about their cybersecurity posture. CMMC is not new, right? And that's the problem. CMMC is just a certification of a clause in a contract that you or your organization have been attesting to since 2017, right? So you've told the government since 2017, absolutely, we've been doing all 110 of these things. The government and the False Claims Act is retroactive. So the government at any time can go back to your attestation in 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and say, you've told us that this was all in place. You tried to get certified and couldn't. Apparently they weren't all in place. Let's have a talk about these other prior 5 years. So that should make it real for a lot of organizations, right? I mean, this is an organization killer. Right. And you really do need a professional to try to help you navigate through best intentions sometimes. Because a lot of it's going to really come down to some creative writing, right? And how some of these organizations write their way into being less of a target.
Sure.
That's not something a lot of organizations, other C3PAOs and even RPOs are going to have a specialty in. Unless they have, a few people like me that's worked on the other side of the fence that kind of knows what the government wants to hear in words, no matter how straight it is.
Yeah. Is there overconfidence by many of these DoD suppliers, Michael, based on what you've seen? You probably saw the report from, was it Cybersheath, where it came out and they said 71% of organizations say they're compliant with level 2 practice requirements based on their self-assessment, right? But then when the DoD actually does the assessment, 29% are actually compliant. So that's a huge chasm when you think about it. And when you tie the liabilities that you just discussed to it, then there should be a lot of cause for concern by a lot of DoD suppliers, I would think.
Well, there is, and so I spent some time beating up on the DIB. So now let's switch gears a little bit. The DoD themselves, the assessors that have been chosen to go out there and adjudicate these 110 controls, from the day that I found out about it, way back when we were in the original working groups, writing the standard and writing the methodology itself, right? The experts wrote it and then handed it off to an organization within the DIB to say, okay, now go adjudicate against this. And it was the wrong organization. 100% all day, every day, Sunday being every day. Wrong organization to be adjudicating those controls because they're using a different methodology than what was written. So that's the first part. Is there is a chasm between how the assessor is looking at it and how the OSC is looking at it. Now, some of how the OSC is looking at it, the reason that they're saying that they're compliant with the control is because the language is so fuzzy without definition, right? So, one of the largest, I think I'll call it a discussion that I had with an OSC was around a simple word, implemented. The requirement, the DFAR 7012 requirement is that all 110 controls be implemented within the organization. Well, what is the definition of implementation?
Right.
And from the CEO's perspective, it was, we bought the software, we bought the hardware for it to go on. We're training up our IT staff on how to use it. We've deployed it to a test group. We've implemented it. And, I couldn't go into a court of law and say, well, obviously that's the wrong definition of implementation. Here's our definition. Let's open up Webster's, right? Because it wouldn't necessarily contradict that CEO's approach to it. However, the assessor's view of implementation is that you've done all the above, plus every system within the organization has now that piece of software. And so that's the chasm. It's not that they're overconfident. It's that they don't understand how the controls are being adjudicated. And that's the danger of self-attestation. If I don't know how I'm being graded and I get to make up my own grading scale, I'm going to win every take.
Yeah, right. Yeah, who fails themselves, right?
Exactly.
So C3PAOs, this seems like an industry that's creating itself as well these days. We're involved in some communities, and it's this many are certified as C3POs, but that's like 20%. There's still hundreds and thousands of others that are really looking to get in this game. Can you talk about that market a little bit and the impact it's going to have on companies and their budgets and getting C3PAOs to come in and audit and assess and all that stuff?
So C3PAOs are to me an interesting entity, right? I mean, they came to existence in the CMMC model based on the idea that the 3PAOs from FedRAMP was working. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, it's working over there, so we're just going to lift and shift, right? And so of course it's going to work here. Now, there are some very marketed differences between FedRAMP and CMMC. FedRAMP is a federally run program with the program office and everything else. CMMC is a commercial certification, no program office. Lots of different personalities with no one head that you have to listen to. So the design is flawed at the start. However, it is what it is. We're stuck with it.
Yeah.
So now where do the three PAOs, kind of fit in? Well, some of that they're still trying to figure out because of some of the rules of engagement that the Cyber AB has given them. There are some things, for instance, that the C3PAO is not allowed to keep any artifacts from any certification activity. To me, that's laughable, right? That opens my organization up to such a wide vary of liability. Why would I sign up for that? Right. I want the documents of truth in my vault when somebody comes at me for $3, $5, $7 million because they didn't get certified. And it's because of XYZ that we looked at. So the C3PAOs are being asked to shoulder a whole lot of responsibility and a greater than normal amount of liability with not a lot of reward that I can see, right? Because it is a very competitive market, right? What is the difference between this C3PAO and this C3PAO? These guys told me it'll cost me $35,000. These guys told me it's going to cost me $135,000.
Because they're all following the same general framework to audit you as to whether or not you're
right
assessed appropriately, correct? So
correct. And so I do not envy C3PAOs right now because they are swimming in very murky water that unless you have patience, you'll never get out of, right? It's just going to be an endless abyss. What I do encourage, some of the C3PAOs that I like, and that list we won't discuss, but I encourage them to be patient, right? That we did this, for instance, when we were doing DICAP, and we had all these things called ACAs out there. And the best kind of rose to the top and all the others just kind of melted away after a couple years. That's what we're going to see in the C3PAO space, right? Is the good, better, and best ones are going to rise to the top, and the ones that were really just in it to make a fast buck, they're going to go away. They're going to eat their young. They're going to be gone inside a year or so. Now, one of the things that I do participate in still is what's identified as the CMMC Standards Council. And the attempt of the Standards Council is to try to clear up some of those questions for OSCs, right? So the one thing that Cyber AB has done is, okay, so here is this list in the marketplace of C3PAOs.
Right.
Choose one. And, okay, based on what? How do I know which one to choose?
Right.
So, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, was given the enviable or unenviable task of creating an objective matrix that we can look at objective data from a C3PAO. I'm just handling the services part, right? So the C3PAOs, RPs, or RPOs and assessors. Take objective data, scale it, and weigh it so that you can come out with this score, basically, 1 through 5 score. This assessor rated a 5, and here are all the reasons why they rated a 5, right? 15 years of education, 20 years of industry experience, these certifications, customer experience is off the charts, all this stuff. Right. Whereas the other ones, right. And again, it's going to be the same data points collected from all of the participants, right. Because it's going to be voluntary. They didn't score quite as high. So that is why you're getting a $35,000 ROM versus a $100,000 ROM. You're paying for experience, right. And knowledge and skill and, reach back support and things like that. Your budget may not be able to, at the end of the day, afford that $100,000 activity, even though you want to, but you still got to get it done. So here, I'm just going to shoot in the middle. This guy gave me 50 grand. We're just going to go with that.
Yeah. Is that model in play right now, or you're still working on the?
No, it is not in play currently. I as a matter of fact, I just finished last month the first what I'm calling the alpha version of it. It's circulating with some friends to see, okay, am I off my rocker with some of these things? What do you think? Is this a fair method? And to just full open kimono, right? I put myself through the scale, and I could not max out at a 5.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, I didn't, just create a scale that, of course, me and all my friends are going to be 5s, and everyone else, are, screw them. If I couldn't max out of 5, I feel that if you max out of 5, you are exceptional, and you should be recognized for that. Right.
When will it be available for DoD suppliers to review so they can take that into account when they're looking for third-party assessment?
So I don't lead the Standards Council. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Egan's does, Derek Egan's. He will be kind of the gatekeeper of when they decide to publish this. I know it's something that the Standards Council is anxious to get out, and unfortunately, through some kind of personal hurdles that I've had to jump over, not to mention multiple surgeries over the past few months, my progress was kind of stalled. But they're anxious to get it out. So I told Mr. Egan I would like to personally have it out by fall. Mm-hmm. Right? If nothing else, just in a beta form that people can, so we can start to get volunteers, right? Because there's only so much I can do with dummy data, right? I need to get real volunteers submitting real evidence to see, even if it's something that they're willing to submit themselves to, and write, kind of the so what paper as to why you would want to submit yourself to such a thing, right? I mean, because you're going to catch a lot of fish just by being on the marketplace. And, of course, it's $100,000 wrong because they have to be that good or they wouldn't charge that much. Yeah. Right. So organizations are taking a risk by subjecting themselves to such a thing. But when you look at the faces that make up the Standards Council, right? I mean, Egan calls this, the coalition of the willing. We've been together since the beginning, since the very first working groups, under the AB's board, and we've stuck with it. It's all volunteer time for us, right? Over since 2020, I've volunteered over 1,700 hours to the CMMC ecosystem, doing this type of work because I believe in it. And so do the rest of us, right? And we have representatives from AWS and Google and Microsoft, and this isn't just 5 dudes drunk in their garage. They said, "Hey, that's a good idea." Now I'm not saying that we're not drunk when we come up with stuff, but it gets worked out in hazes of sober every now and again. Right. So.
Is the Standards Council part of the Cyber AB? They started or is it totally different?
No. So we want to make it very, very, very clear. And Matt Travis has asked us to make it very clear, even though the Cyber AB eventually is going to recognize us. We in no part whatsoever are affiliated with the AB. And it has to be that way. We are adjudicating basically the AB's people.
Right.
So, we can't have any appearance of impropriety. We're even working through getting, ISO certified so that, everything is above board. And we only want to do this so that OSCs know what they're getting when they sign up for it. And based on objective information, right? If you can't afford the Cadillac, and I think a lot of us have been in this situation, right? Where we went to the Chevy dealership, we saw the Corvette, but I got 3 kids, 2 of them playing soccer, 1 playing volleyball. I got to get the doggone minivan. I'll deal with the Corvette later. So, that is the options that we want to give them. Yeah, you want the Corvette. Everyone wants the Corvette. But if you can't afford the Corvette, get the next best thing just to get what you need done for your organization and secure your data.
Yeah. Interesting. So, obviously still a lot of work to do across everything.
Yeah.
Kiteworks is in the space to help customers and help our customer with their file and email data, make sure it's CMMC compliant, doing everything we can there, staying up to date with CMMC. What are some near-term rollouts or changes or aha moments? Is there anything coming that the audience should be knowing is happening that's not just sort of general knowledge?
Yeah, maybe the phased implementation. What can we expect to see starting in May, June timeframe?
So, so one of the things that I think kind of it landed with a loud yet very soft thud, because I don't think people understood the gravity of what the article was saying. There was about 3 months ago, there was a posting that came out of the CIO's office saying that they were not going to hit their target date of May for the interim rule for CMMC. And I think everyone stopped reading at the headline, right, and didn't go under the fold. And it did what the article didn't say. What the article was telling you is they are foregoing the interim rule and going straight to the final rule.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what does that do? So the interim rule has this period of public comment where 30 days. Here are our proposed rules. The world has the ability to make public comment. The posting organization has to adjudicate each one of those comments, even if it's just to say we will not address this at this time. And once the adjudication is done, then they move into the final rule and go into chamber votes and things like that. Well, by jumping straight to the final rule, essentially, if you kind of know how the system works, what they've said is with CMMC version 1, we did an interim rule. We got public comment. We heard what everyone had to say. We don't need to do that all over again. We're just going to post the final rule based on what we had. You will still be able to make public comment, but once it's a final rule, it's done. Right? So if they actually do what they say they're going to do, and come 30 June, they post a final rule, CMMC is now real. Now the ramp up period, right, is obviously going to have some space. For last I heard, it's going to be at minimum an 8-month ramp up period. At maximum, they've talked about an 18-month ramp up period, right?
And ramp up what? Ramp up the
where it gets more teeth, or
what ramps up?
More it gets which organizations have to submit, right? So if it's a brand new contract that has not been awarded, obviously that contract will fall directly under the final rule. If someone this year, for instance, even though the final rule, for instance, was has been published, but let's say the month before they just won a 5-and-5 contract. Well, do they get all 5 of the first years, right, to be CMMC compliant because there was no final rule at the time of award? And then those 5, because technically a contract action, which is how it's indicated whether or not you have to submit for a certification, would not happen for 5 years when they exercise the first one of the 5-year extensions.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you work that in, right? If you just got a 5-and-5 contract, no, we're not going to let you sit out there for 5 years messing things up, right? So but we are going to give you some time to ramp into it, and that's where what is fair comes in. Is it 18 months? Is it 8 months? Whatever. However, the one thing that I would encourage OSCs to understand, it's been in every federal contract I've ever written or been subject to. There's always a clause in there. We reserve the right for announced and unannounced visits, and they are exercising it. And it might just be a spot check of those 110 controls. And if they find one that has not been met, they have the ability to shut down that contract until everything has taken a look at. And they're not this time. I feel like Chicken Little, right? But this time around, they're not playing.
This time for sure. Yeah.
And one of the things when I was an ACA assessor doing DICAP, we would joke around with each other saying I could issue a DATO, but the Army's never going to shut that program down, right? So what I'm wasting my time here letting them know how bad this thing is because they're never going to do anything about it. Well, we have seen firsthand these last at least the last 11 months or so. Yes, the federal government is actually shutting down large multi-million-dollar contracts until these organizations get themselves right.
Mm.
So that's why I can now say a little bit with confidence, yeah, this time they're not playing around.
Yeah, got it. Good.
Well, I read.
Well, we definitely scared some people.
Yeah, it's that point I read that is like 40% of half is like 50% of the DoD suppliers will lose 40% of their revenue if they can't demonstrate CMMC compliance. That's huge. Companies will go out of business if they can't get CMMC compliance and demonstrate it.
But please understand that is not the design of CMMC. CMMC is not designed to drive you out of business.
Right. Of course.
It is simply designed to assure that you doing God's work with what you do for the federal government. No one could do it better than you. Are understanding the gravity of the data that we're entrusting you with.
Right.
That's it. We don't want to drive you out of existence. That is not beneficial for anyone.
Yeah.
Right. But I have heard a lot of organizations, especially some some of the smaller, 5 and 10 man, contractors that, they get in their power bitch sessions. And next thing you know, it's all about, they just want us gone and they just want to take our ideas and steal them. And this is their way of forcing us out. And, I try to remind them that, if they could have done it in the first place, they would have never hired you. So you built the thing. Could you say they can maintain it for any length of time without you? And if your answer is no, then you might have landed on the wrong square. Right? They don't want to push you out. They just want to make sure that, other people that we don't want having your great idea, doesn't get your great idea.
Yeah. Well, we should do this again after the final rule is out there.
We don't even have to wait that long. I mean, I always got a Friday and liquor sitting around. So
there you go.
Next time, hopefully you haven't had surgery the morning of the podcast. Only a Marine would show up for a podcast who had surgery a couple hours before.
When people doubt, right, my background, my upbringing, and who I am, and look at some of the things that I've done, right? This was years ago, and I was a much healthier person. I taught an entire week CISSP class with 2 ruptured discs. And, they couldn't believe it, right? Every day they told me go home, right? But I mean, I had a customer that had people that took time out of their schedule to be available in Virginia for those 5 days. And, I did not want to not give them what they paid for. And, put your head down and just do it. So, this is no different, right? I might have been under a lot of sedation earlier, but I'm here now.
Yep. Very, very lucid. Well, we really appreciate your time, Michael. I think
Absolutely.
We hit up on our 45 minutes here and don't want to take any more, but we'll do it again for sure.
Let's put it back and do it again, May, June timeframe. Speedy recovery. Appreciate your time. For our audience, to check out other Kitecast episodes, go to kiteworks.com/Kitecast. Thanks a bunch.